Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Bay Street Theater. I'm really happy to see all of us in this room, gathered in one room. I don't think it happens all that often. Tonight's Express Sessions event, as you know, will focus on Main Street, the business district right here in Sag Harbor. My name is Gavin Manu. My wife Catherine and I are the publishers of the Sag Harbor Express. Thank you. We're joined tonight by some members of our team. Brian Boyhan, who's the longtime publisher and editor of the Express. He's going to help me moderate this event tonight. Terry McShane is here, Renee Zablosky, Christine Sampson, David Gribben, of course our photographer Michael Heller, and I'm really proud to have them all here with me tonight. Thank you. Like many of you, our business is a mom and pop operation, and we too are concerned and excited about what the future holds for Sag Harbor Village. I'd like to take a moment to thank the people who've supported us to make these events possible. Save Sag Harbor has been incredibly supportive of tonight's event. Their mission to protect and preserve the character and scale of the historic district, as well as Main Street, is very much in line with what we're talking about here tonight. So I'd like to thank Save Sag Harbor very much. The Sag Harbor Inn is also a presenting sponsor for tonight's event. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone more community-minded than Nat Egosi. He's on our panel here tonight. He owns the Sag Harbor Inn. He keeps it open year-round. He opens his door to the community for weddings, events, business meetings, and he's one of the first people to say yes when the community needs something. So thank you, Nat. John Curran, his manager, who's here tonight, and everybody at the Sag Harbor Inn. Out in the lobby tonight, we had People's United Bank, Peak Savers, the Adam Miller Group, which actually donated his table to the Children's Museum of the East End, where I have to admit I spend far too much time. Thank you for coming down tonight. Also to Bay Street Theater, Michelle, Tracy, Brian, Tim, your entire staff for being so welcoming to us and to so many other community events. It's very much appreciated. The Express Sessions have provided us an opportunity to come together face-to-face, off of social media, to kind of talk about some of these issues face-to-face. And I really, I think that's been so important for us, that we've had a lot of great partners that have helped us. Our next event at the American Hotel is going to be brought to you by Advantage Title. It's going to be on land use and preservation. And we're going to be having another event in April on water quality. And the people who are helping us do the entire series really for the year include the Chamber of Commerce here in Sag Harbor, the Sag Harbor Variety Store, Attorney John Leonard, the B&B Bank, Dayton Ritz and Osborne, the Washwick Agency, Saybrook Capital, the Adam Miller Group, Burke and Sullivan, JCP Landscaping, Save Sag Harbor, Fisher's Home Furnishings, the law offices of Tiffany Scarlato, the Sag Harbor Inn, and LTV, which films all our events. Thank you all very much. Lastly, I just want to acknowledge some of our local public officials who are here tonight, but not up on the panel. Sag Harbor Village Mayor Sandra Schroeder is here, along with Trustee Jim LaRocca. Thank you for coming. Our Zoning Board of Appeals Chairman Robbie Stein, Planning Board Chairman John Shaka, and Marianne Eddy, who's the Harbor Committee Chair. Thank you all for joining us. Also, a special thank you to Michael Daly. He's a local realtor. He's very community-minded, and he actually bought 10 tickets to tonight's event, which we've spread around to many of you. Thank you, Michael, very much. All right, now on to the topic at hand. This is obviously a complicated conversation for many reasons. I hope a lot of you had a chance to read our special section that we put out last week, and that only began to touch on some of the issues we're dealing with today. I'm hoping we're not gathered here tonight to just complain about the past or blame all of Sag Harbor's problems on greedy landlords. We're certainly not here to say that all is lost and that Sag Harbor has somehow lost its soul, because that's just not the case. We and our panel of guests, who I'll introduce in a moment, believe that Sag Harbor has emerged as a world-class resort with a vibrant business community, an exceptional restaurant scene, a cherished waterfront, and a community that has held on to its small-town charm and its cultural history. Which is not to say that we don't have problems. During the past 18 months, a series of businesses closed their doors for good. There are a number of empty storefronts on Main Street, and the cost of living and doing business here has skyrocketed. Affordable housing is scarce, and quality employees are becoming more difficult to find. In terms of our business district, for those of you who are still holding on, we'd like to hear how you are doing so. And for those who've closed their doors, what were the causes? Was it simply a cost of doing business? Or was it the business itself that struggled to attract people to its doors? Have property owners cashed out and left landlords with buildings that require higher rents to pay the costs? Which businesses have been most adversely affected by the internet? And how have others used the internet to drive their brick and mortar operations? Is it enough to have just a thriving Main Street? Or does it need to be one that serves all members of the community? It's certainly possible that we all need a little education on all of this. We encourage each and every one of you to speak out and express what you believe, but not just behind closed doors. We ask you not to focus just on the past, but on the future as well. Talk to your neighbors, your friends, your teachers, your coworkers, anyone who considers themselves a stakeholder in this community about what we can accomplish together. Shop local, support local contractors, put out-of-town guests up at the Sag Harbor Inn or Barron's Cove or the American Hotel, and let's encourage the next generation of Sag Harbor residents to do the same through education and outreach in our local schools. Let's engage our youth by offering jobs and exciting opportunities in the business district. And let's certainly encourage landlords, business owners, residents, and second homeowners to think about their legacy in this town and what role they want to play in its future. I'm going to introduce our panelists with a specific question, and we'll ask them to keep their responses brief, 3 minutes or less, please. We have collected questions as well from the community, and following each question, if anybody would like to speak or follow up on the question, we're going to invite them to come down here to the microphone and speak for a minute or less. It can be a question for a specific panelist or just a general observation. Our panelists here tonight are Lisa Field, who's the owner of the Variety Store and the president of the Sag Harbor Chamber of Commerce. Jesse Matsuoka, who's a co-owner of Sen Restaurant. Southampton Town Supervisor Jay Schneiderman. Sag Harbor Village Trustees Aidan Corish and Tom Gardella. Nat Egosi, who I mentioned earlier, the owner of the Sag Harbor Inn and also a Main Street landlord. Emma Walton Hamilton, a board member with the Sag Harbor Partnership, as well as the co-founder of this fine building that we're in here tonight. Tracy Mitchell, the executive director of Bay Street Theater. And Barbara Roberts, who is a board member with Save Sag Harbor. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Lisa, if you could grab the microphone there and don't talk into it like I did to start things. Most people know, obviously, that you own one of Sag Harbor's most iconic businesses, the Variety Store, but you're also the president of the Sag Harbor Chamber of Commerce. What role do you see the chamber filling as the business district continues to evolve?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank you for starting off on a positive note, because I want to make it clear, Sag Harbor's not lost. Like, we're coming together because we want to keep what we have and continue to build on it. So, thank you for starting off on a positive note. I believe that the Chamber of Commerce is more important now than ever, especially as the business district evolves and there are changes going on. The Chamber is primarily a marketing organization. We're all volunteers, we're business owners, and our goal is to promote local businesses and to drive revenue to Main Street. So right now, Sag Harbor has more owner-operators than any other villages nearby. We work here, we live here, we volunteer here, we're part of the community, and our businesses are vital to the community. But we also need the community to support us in order for us to remain here. So the Chamber of Commerce will continue to promote our local businesses, and we need you to continue to patronize the small independent stores that you want to remain here. The future of Main Street is in our hands. We're all responsible, we need to all stand together, work together, and do the right thing. And the Chamber of Commerce is just going to continue to do what we do, which is promoting businesses and just keep repeating our message, the importance of shopping local.
Thank you, Lisa. Jesse, as a young business owner in Sag Harbor who recently announced plans to open a second restaurant on Main Street, you've talked a lot about the challenges of maintaining a staff amid the growing cost of living. How do you think businesses can begin to deal with this issue, and how should local government be involved?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I'm crazy enough to take on multiple businesses in Sag Harbor at this time of the year. But one of the things that I try and ensure with my hiring process is that we start local. We have multiple generations of people. I'm the second generation to run my establishment, and we are starting to see people that came in on their first dates to Sen Restaurant, and their children are now working at our establishment, right? So that kind of local support is necessary for the longevity of our town and for local businesses. So I always try and start with hiring local, speaking to local communities. I'm also on the Chamber of Commerce and trying to really hear out what people have to say about their problems of hiring within the town. And it is a problem, especially with the turnover of real estate and the families that have actually grown up, and the next generation is either too young to start working in establishments like mine, but nevertheless, we try and hire the high school kids. Most of the college kids are actually moving on to different towns or different cities, but I would definitely start off by hiring local. That's the most important thing. The next thing is affordable housing. Being that we own our own building, we are lucky enough to be able to house enough staff to run our establishment. Other businesses don't have that kind of opportunity to be able to afford to offer staff housing. And that is one thing that I would encourage people to look into, to be able to offer your staff some kind of affordable housing for whatever market you might be in. So with my new business, we're trying to share within the business the staff from Sen to the new space, but it's all about ensuring that you have enough people to support each business within that affordable housing unit. And that's where I think maybe the village or these towns can really help out by communicating of how businesses might be able to take on an affordable housing project. I've heard of multiple people trying to come together to purchase homes to then offer that kind of housing for their employees. We're looking into purchasing even more homes for the sole purpose of affordable housing for our own staff. So I think as businesses, we could come together and purchase something on our own to then offer back to the community at an affordable rate.
Okay, thank you. Jay, this year the Southampton Town Board approved the purchase of $4 million in restrictive use and facade easements on the Sag Harbor Cinema property on Main Street. What was this meant to accomplish, and do you see this as a new way historic businesses can be preserved under the Community Preservation Fund?
All right, well, thank you. Great question. So first of all, no stranger to Sag Harbor. I had an office here when I was a county legislator for 12 years. I really enjoyed this community, and Legislator Fleming is now in that office. I got to know this community quite well, fell in love with it in many ways, and certainly the Sag Harbor Cinema it was a tragedy when that burned down. And then looking for ways to try to restore it. Well, the Community Preservation Fund is a fund, it's a 2% tax on real estate transfers. It's been around since, I think, 1999. Across the 5 East End towns, it's generated over $1 billion. It's gone toward land preservation, open space preservation, beach access, farmland development rights. More recently, they modified the program to include water quality projects. It's a great program. We've looked at different interests in land, starting out with farmland, purchasing not the land itself, but the rights to build houses. And more recently, we've been even restricting the types of farming that goes on. And there was a golf, like a miniature golf driving range on County Road 39, and it came up for discussion. People thought that was iconic. They didn't want to see another car dealership and a big box store. And we actually purchased the commercial rights on that property and restricted it just to recreation. And it made me wonder about the cinema. Could we do something similar with Sag Harbor Cinema? Because I knew so much money had to be raised by a relatively small community. Millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I knew that was going to be a real challenge. And so we started investigating a facade easement, which is basically restricts the exterior of the building to the historical, what was there. and then purchasing the commercial development rights, because it could be, lots of different retail rights. And it turns out that the value of those commercial rights were very valuable. And so we were able then to make a $4 million offer to the not-for-profit, and they accepted the offer. There was a few other conditions in there so that it would be not only a community cinema, but it would also be affordable. The prices would have to be affordable, and we held public hearings, and the board ultimately had lots of people. Some of you in this room were there, I remember, and we did move forward, and we supported that, and we now, I don't think the money has transferred yet. Maybe April would know, but we are in for $4 million with the not-for-profit to make sure that always stays a community theater.
Thank you, Jay. Aidan, during your first term as village trustee, you have talked a lot about the ways the village of Sag Harbor could revolutionize its parking structure in an effort to reduce traffic congestion, free up more spaces on Main Street, and as such, help local business. What are some of your ideas, and do you think the current board will seriously explore them?
Thank you. Am I on? Yep. Thanks so much for hosting this great event, because I think it's important for the community to get together and be able to discuss things like this in a more relaxed environment. It's important to point out that I'm not here as a representative of the board, so I'm not going to offer an opinion on what the board may or may not do now or in the future. But I'm talking on my own behalf and what I think I bring to the conversation. When I ran, we looked, talking to people, parking was a perennial issue. If you want to have 3 or 4 opinions, you only have to ask 2 or 3 people. Some people want to build a 2-story parking lot behind Apple Bank. Other people want parking to be restricted, and Main Street should be a pedestrian thoroughfare. And so when you take all of these ideas together, you realize for a vibrant, successful, and prosperous Main Street, that maybe we need a mix of this, that we may look at what we have right now, what's easy to expand to. And I was surprised that when I sat down one rainy Sunday afternoon on Google Earth and counted all the parking spaces we have in town, we have almost 1,000 spaces with white lines on them. And that surprised me. If you had asked me, I would have said 300 or 400. Beyond that, there's an awful lot of parking available on side streets and as you head out of town that's unmarked. And if you were to put a pin into the 5 and Dime and draw a circle that went to the end of Long Wharf and looked at that, you would find that you encompass this enormous area. And psychologically, I think everybody is quite prepared to park at the end of Long Wharf and walk all the way up Main Street because you feel like you're in town. But you try and get someone to park on Main Street out of Bayview and walk the opposite direction, and that's a completely different question. And so I've often wondered if we could create some idea of some messaging and some signing that Sag Harbor is a walking town as well as a driving town. That Sag Harbor is a place that you can park at the periphery and walk in. It's one of the most amazing walks on the East End. It's one of the most amazing strolling villages in the United States. And the idea that we encourage people to drive all the way downtown and be somewhat disappointed because they can't park right outside their chosen venue is, to me, it's ludicrous. We don't expect that anywhere else. We don't drive into Manhattan and expect to pull up outside our chosen restaurant. We expect to park and walk. And so I think there's a certain unreasonableness to the expectations sometimes in Sag Harbor. Since I became a trustee, I did some outreach just to test the water and take the temperature from the park board, the Catholic Church, and the school board to see if there was some way that the community, the village government, and these institutions could get together because they have parking available at times when the village could use it in the evenings, and the idea of running a little electric jitney around that could drop people off at the windmill, and then you could take you back to your car. In principle, everybody was in agreement, but there are issues with that. The park is not lit at night, so you can't drop people off in the dark. But I think these are the type of solutions that we should be looking for instead of building and creating, is to try and use our existing infrastructure. I think that we could change some of the scheduling of parking on Main Street. Some of my board members don't agree with that. I always think that if we had a couple of slots of 15, 20-minute parking at each end, so there was always a space turning over if you're running in and out of the supermarket, that might be an advantage to local people running in and out. At the end of all of that, I sometimes think that if we take a really long-term view, maybe the third rail of Sag Harbor politics is talk about paid parking. But there are so many issues and so many venues that do it successfully. There are so many ways of doing this. We're not talking about parking meters. We're talking about sort of higher tech systems that allow people to interact with the village, so that if we're driving into the village, we know on our phone or on our device that there's parking available on Long Wharf, or there's parking available in various locations in the village, which would mean that people are not circulating constantly looking for a space. I've often wondered how much traffic on Main Street in August is just the churn of people trying to find somewhere to park. So that if we could somehow, through communication, through technology, through using, maybe changing people's behavior and our existing resources, we might be able to come to a solution that's environmentally friendly and doesn't include massive construction in the village. Thank you.
Thank you. Should we just talk about parking for the rest of the night? Tom, you are also on your first term as a village trustee and are a former chief of the Sag Harbor Fire Department. But our question has more to do with your position as an owner-operator of a local plumbing and heating business. While much of the discussion surrounding business in Sag Harbor has centered on Main Street, can you tell us how business is going for other service providers? How is it evolving?
First of all, let me say thank you, Gavin, for inviting me, and thank everybody for coming out. It shows that people are interested in the issues that concern our village and Main Street especially. I think I would echo basically what has already been said, is that the workforce is definitely an issue. Where are we gathering people that are going to stay in the community and work in the community and contribute, say as volunteers, or to participate like in a forum as this? That's a major concern. I personally don't have that concern since my workforce lives with me. My son is who works with me, so I don't have that particular concern. But I mean, every year we say, there's this cliche that we say, the trade parade, right? And every year that trade parade gets worse and worse. It gets bigger and bigger. It taxes our infrastructure. It creates traffic issues. It also, think about it, there's a lot of people, trades especially, that are coming from up the island, coming out here and providing a service out here on the East End. But when something goes wrong or there's an issue and you need to pick up that phone, you're calling somebody where? In Shirley or Mastic or further up the island, and somebody has to be dispatched. I think that it's an issue with the owner-operators. Myself, I'm getting older, the real estate is getting higher, the opportunities aren't there anymore for people, young families as such. What happened with me, the opportunity was there to raise my family out here, to purchase real estate at a reasonable price, to save money. We can have these workforce housing, but what's the long-term solution? In other words, that solves that short-term solution of housing the people that work here. But how do we create opportunities for families to come out here, purchase real estate, start a business, become an active part of the community? That's, to me, is something that we have to look at, not only in government, but also, as business people. How can we help? I mean, I was lucky enough to be hired by a family that was been out here a long time, the Scavone family. They hired me, they taught me a trade, they took me under their wing. So these are the things that I think we need to focus on. We need to work more towards that. There are too many people, I think, that the real estate's being sold at a very high level. How many of these people are actually staying here and participating in the community? It's a part-time housing thing for them. They're renting it out in the summer. How do we form a balance with that? So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Tom. Nat, your family has owned the Sag Harbor Inn for many years, and you are also a landlord on Main Street, the owner of the building that currently houses a number of businesses, including the Kite Shop and Epic Martial Arts. As someone who grew up in Sag Harbor, how do you balance profitability as a landlord and being community-minded at the same time?
Thank you, Gavin. First, I'm delighted to be here to share my experiences and feelings regarding this important topic. The love we all have for Sag Harbor differs for each of us. When you've grown up here and remain part of the community, you have a very clear perspective. Your memories cover your life. Memories of your parents, siblings, relatives, friends, parents of your friends, siblings of your parents or your friends. You see their faces and you hear voices from the past and from those that helped shape your present life, your present day life. You recall their values and their traditions. For this reason, and for me, the balance of profitability versus being community-minded takes all that into account. For me, I account for the legacy of our community. It is the legacy I received from my parents, who built the Sag Harbor Inn and had their offices on Main Street. It is the legacy received and what can be done for the future, for our children, our grandchildren, relatives, friends in the community. At the Sag Harbor Inn, for each of the past 30 years, we've remained open all year as a service to the community. We run a huge loss for a good part of the year, but we are there for those that need us. Our goal is to recover the loss by September. If we've done that and turned the profit, then we can stow away to make it through the next winter, and we met our goal. That metric is totally different than an outside investor. They want a return on their capital. They want to reposition the property so it can be resold so they can cash out. A totally different model. For our Main Street building, the approach again is simple. We want tenants that are long-term minded, that come from the community, are owner-operated tenants, and offer services or goods that are needed by the community at large, all year round. Tenants that are committed to be open all year round. It's not easy to find them, but when you have them, you treasure them as much as they treasure a landlord that balances profitability with being community-minded. You mentioned the Kite Shop. They've been with us for over 25 years. So has Landshark, the clothing store next door. The Martial Arts School has been with us over 10 years. So has Quibaldi Hair Salon. They each fill a need of the community year-round. They are affordable and they're community-minded. They have attractive storefronts and they're part of the community. That balances with me. And in turn, I balance back with our leases. Together we are aligned. Profitability comes from alignment and efficiency. I see and hear about the incredibly high lease rates being charged by others, broker commissions, high cap rates for listing, etc. I think about who are these people and what are they thinking? Clearly, when corporations and management companies get involved and added costs plus loss of income during that transaction and then higher expectations for a return based on their perception of risk because they don't understand necessarily Sag Harbor, all that results in higher rents. They come to Sag Harbor for what they see here, but what they want to change Sag Harbor by changing the market for their needs. Changing is different than aligning. We want tenants who align with the community. They succeed in the long run, as we do as a landlord. Together, we create that legacy. Thank you.
Emma, you have discussed your concerns about this being a crossroads moment in the village of Sag Harbor. What are your concerns, and how does and can the arts community support the greater Sag Harbor you hope is maintained?
Thank you, Gavin. So I want to start with the positive, too, and just start by saying that since Steve Hamilton, my husband, and Sybil Christopher and I created the Bay Street Theater 27 years ago, we have seen a tremendous amount of positive, vibrant growth and change in Sag Harbor. And the degree to which Main Street has been enhanced by and also has supported Bay Street's presence was then and continues to be now profoundly meaningful, and is a very true reflection of the value that the arts brings to the community, the synergy between the two, both financially and socially, or economically and socially. Among the many, many other positive changes we've seen is the engagement and advocacy of groups such as the Sag Harbor Partnership, which I'm proud to be on the board of, and Sag Harbor, and the incredible work that these grassroots volunteer organizations have done with respect to community preservation, from everything from saving the cinema to protecting open spaces, to clean water, to something as simple as installing bike racks on Main Street. There's also been huge growth in the year-round community here since we built Bay Street in 1992. I think the internet and 9/11 were two huge events that impacted our community directly in that way. And through my work in Bay Street's education programs, I saw the student populations expand in all our local districts exponentially. And we know that many second homeowners became year-round residents at that time, and others relocated here full-time. Houses were renovated, houses were built, and property values escalated dramatically. And of course, that's a double-edged sword. And that brings me to the concerns that you asked about. So as those property values increased, more outside investors became attracted to Sag Harbor. Commercial properties we bought and sold, rents have increased, and we have in fact now lost some of our most cherished year-round Sag Harbor businesses. Going way back to the Paradise Diner, which is one of my favorites, to more recently Confidoro, Country Lane, our beloved bookstore. I really worry that other local family-owned businesses will be replaced by seasonal tenants whose main interest is capitalizing on the resort nature of Sag Harbor rather than serving the year-round community and building a legacy here, as Matt so eloquently described his business is dedicated to. I worry that the critical mass of what we lose one business at a time will destroy the historic fabric of Sag Harbor that we all cherish so much. I worry that Bay Street Theater will not be able to stay here in this location and be the asset that it is to our community. I worry that my children who were born and raised here will not be able to afford to stay and to have a home and make a life here. I don't know what the solution is, but I do know that it starts with events like this. And I want to take a moment to thank the Sag Harbor Express for their ongoing commitment to ensuring that these critical conversations take place. And also to Bay Street for providing us with the venue, the gathering point in which as many possible voices can be heard. And that brings me back to the first point, which is about the value of the arts to a community. And I think there are two ways that the arts community supports the greater Sag Harbor that I hope to see maintained. The first is economically. We know the arts bring money to a community. They create jobs, they draw visitors into the area, and those visitors then spend their money at other local businesses. And then the second is the social awareness. The arts hold up a mirror. They allow us to see who we've been, who we currently are, and who we're becoming. And they provide both the venues and the context for essential discussions such as these, in which we can look at ourselves and assess our collective community values, and then consider the kind of world that we wish to leave to our children.
Thank you.
I don't have to say anything after that.
Well, now we're going to get to the real meat of it. Now, Bay Street Theater has obviously been a cornerstone institution for Sag Harbor Village, not only as an important arts institution, but an important economic driver, feeding music and theater goers into downtown Sag Harbor. There is, as Emma mentioned, concern that Bay Street could be moving from Sag Harbor. Can you give the community an update to where the theater's future stands?
I'll try. Nothing has really changed since we probably discussed this the last time, but we work in a building that is not owned by us. We have a landlord, and first I'd like to say thank you to Emma and Steve and Sybil, may she rest in peace, for having the foresight and the just chutzpah to make it happen. I mean, it really is incredible, and so it's been, we've had good years and bad years along the way, and I'm happy to say we're in a very good place now. The community has come out and been very supportive, but that does not change the reality of all the things that these folks are saying. One is, and I'll get to what's happening with Bay Street, but one is the reality of housing and a workforce. For us, I have now 14 full-time year-round employees, and I can tell you that only 3 of us live anywhere near here. and the others come from about an hour and 20 minutes away. And that just is not sustainable for them or for the theater or for any business. And that's true when I ran Plum TV and my husband's business. He's an architect. He's got 23 employees. He's able to pay them a lot more than I'm able to pay mine. Nonetheless, they still live farther away. So it really does go back to these issues. They affect every business out here. And as Nat was saying, and Tom, it's hard to, the younger people are not staying here. And certainly it's very difficult for new youth to come in. So all of that doesn't change the fact that we're here and we rent this building and we continue to further on. But the fact of the matter is we're still on a lease. We have 4 years left on our lease, but we are always looking. Our goal, my goal, and the goal of the Board of Trustees is to make Bay Street a permanent institution. And that means we need to have a home that we own, a building that we own that is large enough for us to continue the work. The fact is we've so outgrown this facility as it is, and there's no place to go on Main Street anymore. This is it. So we rent 14,000 square feet here. We rent another 8,000 square feet in Riverhead for a shop. We rent another 2,000 square feet in the summer for our summer camps. And we rent 15 houses every summer along with hotel rooms. So the hotel and houses alone for our staff and our artists is $350,000 a year. I mean, that's the cost for us of another production or two that we could be offering the community. So it really is about hopefully finding a place, and whether it's here and expanding down the wharf, that would be fabulous, or whether it's, some people have heard, we're looking at the Agway. We are still looking at Agway. That is a family-owned business, and they're very willing to work with us. They've been very forthcoming. But we're looking at a very big, heavy lift. So if anyone happens to have $35 million in their back pocket, it would allow us to build not only the facility here, but replace the shop and even possibly support some artist housing on it. So these are all, it's very big projects, very big things to think about and consider. And I can say from a personal standpoint, I live a half mile from here. My daughter goes to school at Sag Harbor at Pearson. And so nothing would please me more than to be able to stay where we are and add on if there was some way possible to do that.
All right, thank you. Barbara, you have mentioned that the nonprofit Save Sag Harbor would be interested in organizing a visioning study that would identify and clarify a brand for Sag Harbor's Main Street. What would that entail, and why do you believe that would be necessary?
Well, first off, thank you, Gavin, so much for hosting this. This, I think, is a very important event. And Tracy, thank you so much for sharing with us what could be happening with you. This kind of bringing to the community's attention where our issues are, I think, is very important. This event reminds me of the first event that founded Save Sag Harbor in July of 2007. And from that event, a lot of stuff happened. We ended up funding a report about the best practices that could happen to keep CBS out of Sag Harbor. It led to us writing the incredible commercial code that actually has helped the Main Street Sag Harbor really, really survive. So first off, on behalf of the board of Save Sag Harbor, we do want to say that we hope this is the first of a series of conversations and actions to really start getting on top of some of the things that we're talking about. The second thing that is in my own background is from my work with Sag Harbor. I also was put on the Suffolk County Planning Commission, where I served for 10 years, and also chaired the Small Business Advisory Committee for the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. But most important, I wake up every single day and ask myself what I can do today to help a small business start, grow, and create new jobs and new wealth and new opportunities for people. And now most of my work is through Columbia University and Hofstra, and I also work with communities to put together workshops and programs to keep small business. And all of that work, the number one thing that I know is that through planning, you can absolutely control your future. Even no matter what any of you want to do, if you think about that you want to lose weight or you want to do something, thinking about it is your first step. Your second step is putting it in writing. Once you put something down in writing, you're going to do it. And if you start talking about it and saying it and telling it to other people, you will get the job done. So what I'd like to stress is what's happening here at Sag Harbor is not unique to us. Every brick and mortar retail operation throughout the world is being challenged by what is happening with online sales. This is not unique. But the biggest thing to be successful is to give an extraordinary, unique experience. So in my opinion, we are not relishing and celebrating enough the incredible, unique opportunity and experience that Sag Harbor is. We've talked about restaurants, we've talked about our anchor stores, we've talked about the diversity, we've talked about the cinema coming here. We also have live music. We have a literature culture. We also have a strong holistic health culture with Yoga Shanti provisions. We have an incredible maritime history. And of course, we have an extraordinary diverse history with the Sans community. This is truly a unique experience. And in my opinion, with a little work getting that in paper, we can solve our problems. So what is a comprehensive plan? It's a process where people in government, business, landlords, our organizations like our schools, our not-for-profits, our fire department, and you, the citizens, come together to figure out what is really going on well here, what really are our problems, and sit together and sort them out. In my own research, in the last few days, I found a comprehensive plan that was done by the Village of Perry, New York. I urge you, if you're interested in it, to Google it. There's 2,000 people who live in that village, and there's another 4,000 people that live right around them. Very similar to the dynamic of Sag Harbor. We have 2,000 people here, 6,000 people in the 1196 zip code. In 9 months, they did a beautiful, comprehensive plan. The process was, they started with surveys. They identified 12 people who represented different aspects of the community. They did intense focus groups based on the demographics. So they would go into the schools, they would go into the fire department, they would meet with seniors, they would meet with wealthier communities, other communities. The committee would meet twice a month to put things together. Then there were 4 open kind of meetings like this where ideas were discussed, and then a final document. That was done in 9 months, and it clarified what needed to be done for the next 10 years. An incredible document. Many of the ideas would apply to here. So my final kind of message is that we must remember to shop locally, dine locally, and bank locally, and most important, remind our kids to do it. But the only way that we really will know the future of Sag Harbor is to invent it ourselves today. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. These prepared remarks are important to kind of set the stage for some of the stuff we'd like to talk about, but it's really some back and forth from you. We did gather some questions prior to this event from some of you, and Brian is going to take over from here on out, and hopefully we'll have a little more conversation with our panelists and have some questions from you. Brian?
Thanks, Gavin. Thank you all. Thank you all for joining us. As Gavin mentioned, we solicited some questions from some of you online, which we're going to get to. What we'd like to do here is kind of divide the rest of this conversation up into vague chunks, just so we can kind of address the big issue of Main Street in bites, as it were. We have, I've sort of just been jotting down some notes. There's the issues of village government, what they can do, and what the constituency would like to see of the village government. And I've got to put you guys on the spot a little bit. Landlord and tenant relationships, long-term planning and affordability for the village. And I'd like to actually start with kind of what we started with earlier, housing and workforce, which really kind of seems to be at the root problematically for much of this conversation. What we'll do is, as we go through a couple of these questions, I'm going to ask for people who want to come down and ask a question directly here, as Gavin mentioned. So we'll try to keep vaguely to the subjects that we're talking about. And I just want to throw, excuse me, I just wanted to throw out a statistic here that I think kind of maybe explains a little bit about who we are at this point. Back in 2000, the total assessed value of the village, of all the village property, was $46.6 million. That was just a little under 20 years ago. By 2010, the total assessed value in the village had become $2.2 billion. And I called the village office this morning to find the most recent number, and the tentative roll has the total assessed value of the village at $3.1 billion. So we've gained $1 billion worth of value in less than 10 years. It's pretty remarkable, but I think it kind of paints a picture about the community that we have become. And I think that wealth frames a lot of the conversations that we're having. So let me just start. I'm going to call back on Jesse and Jay and Aidan and Tom. This is, so we will start with, Tom, we're going to start with you because there's something you mentioned earlier that I jotted down. This is actually a question from Nada Barry, if Nada's in the audience. Hi, Nada.
She is there.
I can always count on Nada to start a conversation. A great amount of the conversation comes down in Nada's mind to affordable housing for workers, the service industry. She notes, take note of the constant number of help wanted signs. Maybe the village needs to be more aggressive and forward-thinking in dealing with this problem. Now, a sister question that we had come up with, which I was going to direct to Jay, but now I'd like to have all of you field it. The town has been active in addressing affordable housing issues. Jay, have you seen any data or information that supports the importance of affordable housing in helping to provide a stable and affordable workforce? And Tom, if I could just ask you, you mentioned earlier, this is a mouthful, right? You talked about help and staffing and the need to, from a residential standpoint, to create a balance. How do you do that?
Wow, that's a...
So, do you want me to start?
So Jay, you want to start with this?
All right, so the question was, is there data supporting the need for affordable housing, something like that? So, it's like, it's raining out. Do you need a weather forecast to know that it's raining out? You look out your window. So, we see the traffic, certainly, the trade parade that was mentioned, as the workforce tries to commute in. We see the code enforcement issues with the overcrowded basements. We see the cost of everything going through the roof. All of, so many people who had to leave our community in search of other communities that were more affordable. Myself as a business person know how hard it is to find employees, how challenging that is getting. So, I could probably ask in this room, like, how many of you could afford to buy the house that you currently live in, right? So raise your hand if you have enough salary to buy the house. Anybody? Maybe one of you. All right. So, this is a crisis. This is an emergency, the affordable housing situation. And it's interesting. Yesterday we did a ribbon cutting for 2 new houses out in Southampton, right at the border of the village, and that was nice. It's always exciting. We had new families moving in. It's great. We had to do a lot of work to subsidize it to a point where they could become affordable. We have on County Road 39 another 15 units of affordable housing. We just passed an accessory apartment law, which I think is a landmark piece of legislation that allows a lot more lots to have accessory apartments, provided they're affordable. So you can now have an accessory apartment, but the rent has to be below a certain threshold, and the person occupying that unit has to meet certain income requirements. So there's so much more that we have to do. It was mentioned before, I think by Jesse, about businesses being able to put, rent homes and things like that. Typically, like in the town of Southampton, we don't allow more than 4 unrelated people to occupy a house. And so that becomes a code violation when you have 5 or 6 workers. They're not related. So, we might need to look at some of those things to make it a little bit easier. There's no simple solution. We now have proposed, the town is considering 60 very affordable units on County Road 39 behind the church in Southampton, and people are coming out of the woodwork to oppose it. A lot of people called me in support of it, but I have lived through a lot of these. Every time you try to concentrate housing in one spot, all the people who say they support affordable housing, and they probably do, but they prefer it wasn't anywhere near where they are.
Hey, Jesse, how far away are your employees coming from?
So at the moment, for the people that don't live within my building, don't live within my house, don't live within my mother's house, my father's house, the apartment that I rent on Main Street, multiple apartments that I rent on Main Street, the furthest person is about an hour and 40 minutes away.
Wow.
And he comes in 6 days a week. So it's painful to see these people work so long, all day, all night, and then have to drive home. I mean, it's dangerous, actually. So as much as possible, that's why, I have extra bedrooms for those people if they don't feel up to driving. And I offer it to any of my staff members that actually want to enjoy Sag Harbor after work. And I tell them that there are beds, they're available. You can stay here, stay overnight, and then go home in the morning. And that's more important to me, to have a safe environment, safe working environment, than to just kind of look the other way and have them drive another hour and 45 minutes back to where they came from.
Thanks.
We do the same. We do the same thing. There's many nights here when we get out really late after concerts and whatnot, and I'm always asking if an employee is, do you really want to drive home now? It's 1 o'clock in the morning, and I know they're going to get home at 2:30. And I said, come stay at my house. Just come crash with us. It really, we have one house that we keep year-round for when more of that kind of stuff happens, but we do the same thing, Jesse.
Aidan? Aidan, Nada had wondered if we couldn't put more pressure on the village. Can you help us understand what role the village might have, if any, in this?
Wow. Well, in a community where affordable is north of $1 million now, I don't think there's a house on the market in Sag Harbor for $1 million or less. So affordable becomes a difficult issue. It's difficult for the village. We don't have land, we don't have resources. We do what we can. We have an affordable housing fund that works as best as it can under the circumstances. But one of the things, when I look at these numbers, Jay, you talk about we built 60, you bring 60 apartments online. Do we have any idea how big this problem is? Like, what are we dealing with here? Is 100 apartments going to do anything? Or are we talking thousands?
We do actually have some numbers, and there was a Long Island workforce housing, Suffolk County workforce housing needs assessment done. You can Google it,
Jay,
and
the microphone?
you will find it. And it does have allocations, including Sag Harbor. town by town, village by village, in terms of what the needs were. That was in 2008.
Wow.
So things have, it's only gotten worse.
Worse, yeah.
But if you Google, you'll see that was
I'll do
done
that.
by Suffolk County in partnership with Rutgers University Center for Urban Policy Research. So
But
it's a good study.
Yeah, but it would seem to me, my gut feeling is that the numbers are probably staggering. That if everybody came out and said, like, I can count probably at this table, we're probably looking for 25, 30 affordable homes for people, or even more. And you multiply that across the wider community, and it may beg, we may have to look at like how we zone, how we rezone, like what do we do as a community? Do we need higher density housing? To your point, nobody wants it.
Right.
Yeah, everybody wants it in theory, but it's, Lord, make me chase, but not right now. That people would prefer somebody else to deal with it in the long run. But I think that these issues happen slowly until they happen quickly, and if we don't get ahead of it, we'll fall off a cliff. All of a sudden, the theater won't open one some night because there won't be enough staff, or a restaurant won't be able to open because there won't be enough staff, and it'll become a crisis. I think we're close to it now, but it demands a really difficult conversation that we have to have with ourselves as to what we do with land use. How do we assign people homes? What sort of conditions are attached to that? And who does it? I mean, I look at, as a member of the Board of Trustees in Sag Harbor, I don't think it's a problem that we alone can deal with, even within our village. I don't think we have the wherewithal to do that. I think this problem is bigger than us. I think it's the 600-pound elephant in the room. We have so many other issues, but I think this, among any other, could be our downfall.
Hey, Tom, I just wanted to get back to you,
Sorry.
not to let you off the hook entirely
I
there.
was supposed to answer that question first.
You were, I know, yeah. Well, you know how
All right, that's-
politicians
they
can
got
be.
it. No, I don't think there's any simple solution. Those numbers that you just read off, the assessed value of the village, I mean, that's incredible. And go to a situation of a young person that gets an opportunity to get a job here and work here and learn a trade. Where are they going to rent? And okay, so they're renting someplace. All right, so now they want to be a part of the community. Are they going to sit there and rent that house forever? What happens if the house is sold? The real estate becomes so much, the landlord sells the house because the house is worth $3 million. So now the family's displaced. I mean, how can a government work to create an atmosphere where that family can stay and they can be a part of the community and buy into the community? I mean, those numbers that you just read off,
Staggering.
how can we as a government, what can we do? Can we loosen up? I mean, we don't want to make things unsafe. We want to make sure that safety comes first when it comes to the building codes and code enforcement. But maybe there are some areas we can look at to create some more housing, but that, I don't know, I don't think there's any simple solution.
Let's ask anybody in the audience who have an observation. Mr. LaRocca, would you come on up, Jim.
My information is old, but I've been involved in a lot of these issues most of my career. There are approximately now 3.5 or 3.6 million people in Nassau and Suffolk, about evenly divided between the two counties.
1.5 million in each,
Yeah, so 3 million. I don't know the current number, but for a very long time, from the end of the war into the 60s, 70s, and 80s, a majority of working people commuted from where they lived. I don't know the percentage today, but I think it's still a very substantial number. A commute of an hour and 20 minutes is commonplace on Long Island. With the advent of a lot of big companies into Suffolk, Mid-Suffolk, Computer Associates, all of the businesses on Route 110, people on the North Fork began commuting as far as 110. So if you take the number of people who commute to New York City an hour or more, the people who have on-island commutes of an hour or more, people who get on in Ronkonkoma, who after they've driven to Ronkonkoma, then take the train and then have to get on the subway in the city. It is commonplace for people to have long commutes. Not that I'm advocating it, but it's a recognition of the way it works. As I hear this discussion, one could conclude that you all aspire to be able to have a community in which all of the people who work in our industries can live here and not commute from somewhere else. And I would ask if anybody knows of a community like that anywhere in the country, where the community can be self-sustaining in providing good jobs and affordable housing. And I would just suggest to you it's very rare. That doesn't mean the aspiration is wrong. Most of you are, in one way or another, trying to solve it by providing housing. That's the market working, one would argue. It's difficult, it's expensive, but it is a solution that you are finding your way to because nothing else is working. When you see the trade parade in the morning, you're seeing an expression of a market, that people are enduring a miserable ride to come here every day because the economics of it work for them. And it's a difficult competition if you're based here and all of the rest. So this is meant to be planning. I would like to hear the panel try to express what the actual goal is. Is it to make a community, an economy and a community, that will not have to rely on commuters? Because that is one possible conclusion from what's been said so far. That's my question.
Could I address that?
Go ahead, Tom.
Well, I would say that I'm not trying to create a utopia or see, somewhere where all the people in the community live here, work here. I don't think that's a reality either, but we do need to have people in the community that do live here and work here and can sustain something like a volunteer fire department or a volunteer ambulance. And we see those numbers are slowly dwindling, and the volunteers are taking on a lot. So the real estate is a driving force here, the expensive real estate. So it's getting harder for young families to purchase a piece of property and make a stake in the community. Mm-hmm. It's getting more and more difficult. So what's the solution? How do we keep those people that are going to volunteer, are going to participate? That's what I'm trying to achieve. I'm not trying to make some utopia. I think Jim is exactly right. A lot of people commute on the island. Mm-hmm. They drive to and from work. But like Jesse said, does he really want the guy driving an hour and a half after he's working? So we create some workforce housing. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's a total utopia, but mm-hmm. we do need to try to come up with some solutions to build, keep the community strong.
Thanks, Tom. Nat?
I'd like to make a comment. It's an interesting comment about observation about commute. My son commutes 2 hours every day. So there's a lot of people commuting, I get that. But in terms of this utopia, if I go back to my youth, some of us would remember that as well, that a large part of the workforce in Sag Harbor lived here in Sag Harbor. Maybe that was the utopia. And the concern today is that the people who work here don't live here. Then who lives here?
Thank you, Nat. We have another question here, switching gears. Oh, I'm sorry, Jesse? Or Jay?
No, I just wanted to add to Jim's question too. So the one thing that's worth noting is there is now a commuter train. So for the first time. So just starting this week on Monday, we have 2 trains. First one leaves Spionk in the morning, second one Hampton Bays, and one makes it to Amagansett, one makes it all the way out to Montauk. So we're trying to give people an option to get here who don't have to get stuck in that trade parade. It's a 10-minute ride from Hampton Bays to Southampton Village by train. And by car, when it gets busy, it's an hour plus. So it's a big difference. But I think the real question is, what is community? What is community? And is there a reasonable percentage of your workforce that should live within your community? Because you do start to lose the sense of community when your school teachers can't come to the play at night, or the nurses can't respond to an emergency at the hospital. it starts to feel different. It loses part of its soul, I think, the fabric of a community. So I think if no community houses any percentage of their workforce and expects somebody further west to do that, it's just not going to work. And that's what we're seeing. It keeps migrating further and further west with the hope that maybe, Riverside or Riverhead or Patchogue or Yaphank will be able to house all of our workforce. And you start to see those communities start to gentrify too. And at some point we have to think about sustainability. How are we going to sustain ourselves? And besides the loss of that sense of community. So I think we do have to figure out a reasonable percentage of our workforce that we can house within our community.
Okay. Jesse, did you want to add something?
Yes. Well, I actually wanted to pass this along to Barbara because, there's so many other communities that have gone through exactly what we've gone through. I know that we have a very special community here and we are a very special village, but there are other people going through the same growing pains as we have. And we should be learning from others of at least understanding what went wrong when they tried it or what went well so that we can copy that and then, be able to implement that through our village, through the government, and through businesses.
Yeah. I'm a strong believer accessory apartments is a big part of the answer, but in other communities, certainly doing more workforce housing for the summer community, that's more of a dormitory situation. I think in some ways what happened with Southampton College is lost in the shuffle, and still if you look at that piece of land, the potential of what could be there. I also have seen a lot of, we have a lot of shopping malls not too far away from us, particularly in the Yaphank area, and there is a lot of work now of taking over shopping malls and making them into incubator spaces where there is sort of dormitory housing that 20-year-olds like, which there's a lot of research now that 20-year-olds actually want to live in small space for the room that they go to and then have an open community kind of internet kitchen kind of experience. So building on what Jay was saying, I think some of our codes for housing we definitely should be looking at and accepting perhaps different kinds of group living situations. On the other end, seniors have the same issue potentially here, that we will want to at some stage have community or some sort of housing where 3 or 4 older people can live together in a communal area. So I think looking at housing codes is part of the problem, is part of the solution.
Thank you, Barbara. Let's talk a little bit about what can go on to Main Street, what types of shops that or businesses can provide for a thriving Main Street. And this is a question from Thomas McGuire. Is Thomas McGuire out there? There he is. And this, I guess, is a question best answered by Aidan and Tom. And I'm going to throw a second part of this question in. Can you review the legal limits of what the village can do to define the types of stores that can be in the commercial district and also set or limit increases of commercial rents, if that is even possible? And then the second part of that question, back in 2009, the village redid its code to answer some of the questions that we have here tonight. Is it time for us to revisit that zoning code? Gentlemen?
All right. Right, that's a multi-part question, so I'm going to try and unpack it here. As far as can the village influence what a private property owner can charge for rent? Absolutely not. I don't see anything in the village code that gives us that possibility. It's still America. People still have property rights and people can rent them. The market sets the price. That's an unfortunate part of reality in our town. We saw some property on Main Street sold recently. It's very much up in the air as to what will happen with that. We live in a world where commerce has fundamentally changed. In my other job, I'm involved in retail marketing for some national and international brands, and the big buzz word right now is DTC, is direct to consumer. Everybody wants to go straight from the manufacturer to the consumer, and we see that in entertainment with Netflix. It's like you pay your $9 a month. Netflix is probably 6 acres of beige buildings in Nebraska with satellite dishes, as opposed to CBS BlackRock downtown, where they've got like 50 or 100 floors of attorneys and lawyers drawing up contracts for various destinations around the world. So you have the same with Amazon, direct to consumer. They want to take it right from the manufacturer and drop it at your door. But an interesting thing about all of this, and some of the brands we work with, they recognize the idea that experience is a huge part of purchasing, and that without experience, a brand starts to lose its luster. So we're constantly recreating store interiors on Fifth Avenue for people, so that every month a customer comes back and there's something new to see. There's a new environment. One of the great things we have here is we have the most incredible environment that changes all year round. Like, we have this catchphrase of attract, engage, and educate or entertain. So you attract people, you engage them, and then you entertain them or you educate them. Sag Harbor is really attractive. People come here because it's a beautiful village to walk around. That's the first thing. We engage them through, I believe, our restaurants, our retail, and especially through our cultural institutions. It's a great place to visit. We have an awful lot going for us. So we need to take care of what we have. We need to, looking at I think the job done on our village code, what was it, about 2009, 2010, did a really good job at maintaining the character of the village without placing too much of an onus on the property owners. I think we're trying to balance people's rights here in what's good for the individual, what is their right to do with their private property, and what's good for the village in the long term. But if I was to sum it all up, I think it's people come here for culture, they come here for entertainment, and they come here for the environment and the beauty of the village. And if we can maintain that, we'll be a long way towards maintaining the vibrancy of our Main Street.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, yeah, I was going to ask you and Jesse actually to weigh in on this as well, but Lisa, go ahead.
So I want to speak as a commercial property owner and as someone who also runs the business, my family business, within the commercial property that we own. And I know that it's not possible for government, and I'm grateful that it's not possible that a government can come in and say, well, we're gonna decide what you can do with your business, and if you decide not to work that business and want to rent out that business, we're gonna decide how much you can charge for rent. And I kind of resent that people talk about that as if, well, let's go in and decide how the businesses, people have made investments in their real estate, let's make some rules over how they can get that investment back. Nobody's saying, well, the guy that bought the house on Madison Street, let's go in and decide that he can't pay that much for Madison, and the person that wants to move out. So I'm kind of in the unique perspective because, I'm running a family business. I want to stay in business, and we have every intention of that. And as long as, people still continue to shop and we can keep the business viable, we will. But if it does get to a point where, if people aren't shopping and supporting it, and it gets to a point where, okay, well, this business isn't working, it's not really fair for someone to come in and say, well, you shouldn't be able to get a return on your investment that your family has spent 50 years working towards.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Lisa. Tom, did you want to say something?
No, I would agree with what Lisa's saying, and I think that just as the code was developed in 2009, I have an open mind. If we need to look at some things, we'll look at them, and the village has to be able to change with the times if we need to. I mean, I don't think that anything should be written in stone. Situations change, areas change, and if we need to address something, I think we should get together and do it.
Mm-hmm. So. Actually, Lisa and Jesse, Aidan brought something up that I wanted to ask you about. The retailers and the business owners have a responsibility themselves to get people in the door and separate money from their wallet. So what creative things can businesses do in Main Street to ensure that their business thrives, being inventive or, as Aidan was mentioning, to improve the experience of their business?
Well, I would say one of the most important things that, this community has been doing for a very long time. Lisa is the president of the Chamber of Commerce, and what the Chamber has done to put on these village-wide events. You know, the events that are put on create so much buzz, and that is constantly feeding the retail stores, the restaurants, and everyone, the whole community. And that's one of the things that I think is unique within Sag Harbor, that the Harbor Fest, Harbor Frost, these events that people almost take, well, yeah, they take it for granted because it is difficult to keep putting on these events. It is costly, keeps on getting more expensive to put on these events, and I'm thankful for, you know, the chamber of putting them on. I'm thankful for the other businesses, especially, I mean, as an arts community, Bay Street Theater, I would have to say, is one of the biggest reasons why my off-season, I don't have to close, right? It is truly because of the buzz and the events that are put on throughout the whole winter that we have a big enough event on the weekends that it makes it worth it for me to house, to staff, and to keep on putting out, as Nat had said, you know, to be open through the winter is not so I can make money. It's truly to hold on to a staff and provide a year-round salary for them. And if it wasn't for that, I mean, I can't go out of business, but I need to be able to at least sustain my viable business through the wintertime. And these events help. So the more events that we can put on, the more community-based events that people come out of their homes and start spending money. That's locally. That is what really helps.
Tracy?
I would just like to add to that I think sometimes people forget how connected our businesses actually are. And so we too stay in business in the winter strictly to, there's no profit margin there. We actually lose money in the winter, but it's to keep the staff going and to be committed to the community for a year-round place to gather and support our Main Street. And I think most people here would agree that we earn our money in July and August in order to support the entire rest of the year. It used to be May through August, but really it's July and August now. The other thing I would like to just say is that I think we all have to start thinking about retail in a little bit of a different way. One is, again, as Lisa said, making sure our own children and younger people know this. I caught my daughter ordering whatever on Amazon, and I literally had to sit her down and explain why that $30, what that means to somebody out there in the world versus what it means for the variety store. So I think that's a matter, there's an educational piece of this that is huge, because that's not something that's being taught in the schools. And I think, a lot of people say, it can be shipped to the house, it's so much easier. Well, if you don't want to see the variety store around in a few years, that's what you're really saying by spending your dollars elsewhere. The other thing that, thank you. Just one other thing that I would add is that whenever these businesses go out, like adornments, you mentioned Country Life, these are people that are locals who the local businesses support each other. It's not very common when the bigger businesses, Chase Bank or something like that. It's much more of the mom and pop shops where I run down the street and say, oh my God, Joe, can you give me a couple of raffle items? We're really short. Of course. The other thing I would mention is, again, thinking a little differently. For example, I don't know anything about the Schiavone's business here in town, but I would bet you that the day that the dry cleaners cleaned, that they closed, the dry cleaners on town closed, I would bet that Schiavone started to lose business. Why? Because now you have to go to Bridgehampton to get your clothes done. So everyone's doing that all year round on a weekly basis, and now if I've forgotten something, I'm there anyway in King Cullen, right? Now, so there's a lot of these small things, and again, it doesn't have to be that we put a full dry cleaner on Main Street. It certainly doesn't need to be on Main Street, and it doesn't even have to be a full dry cleaner. Maybe it's just the kind of pick up, they take it somewhere else and bring it back. Adds to the traffic, but you know, there's just things like that that I think, and a shoemaker. You know, the things that make a year-round community are things that we have to start putting back into.
Mike Scavoni's not here by any chance, is he? Is Mike Scavoni here? Okay. It would have been interesting, because I think anybody who's shopped in Scavoni's in the past 5 years has seen a change, and he'd be a good person to talk to. Lisa?
Right. I just kind of wanted to answer that question when you said, to what extent is it the responsibility of the business owners to keep up and make sure that we stay relevant? And kind of to what Tracy was saying, that it like, every day when we open, we need to say, what can I bring in? Is technology changed? How can I work with this? What new products exist now that didn't exist even 6 months ago that I need to bring in? And we do need to be innovative with ideas of, I'm not saying I'm doing this, but it's like, oh, maybe I could get a corner and do dry cleaning. I'm not going to, but that's the type of thing that like, you're always thinking as a business owner, and it really, it is our responsibility to make sure that we stay relevant.
Mm-hmm. Nat, you and I had a conversation up in our office a few weeks ago when we were kind of prepping for this, and you talked quite a bit about what you called a silent majority that exists in Sag Harbor, a population that perhaps remembers a different Sag Harbor and is frustrated by some of the changes on Main Street. Can you talk a little bit about that, and maybe what kinds of businesses that population would look to?
You know, there is a huge silent majority in Sag Harbor, and some are here, most are not. And when I grew up here, when you were in high school, you're thinking to yourself, what am I going to do when I get out of high school? What kind of job could I get? Could I even find a job in Sag Harbor? What kind of job could I have here? And a lot of folks, hung a shingle and started a business, and that was their method. And Tom described a little bit about him, and he has his son there, right? So in today's situation, it's kind of odd to hear that we have to travel in workers from an hour and a half away, and the people that are here, where are they working? They're not working here, they're going somewhere else and leave. So we have this sort of disconnect that's going in the different directions here. But I think with regard to the silent majority, a lot of them would benefit from more interaction from an education point of view to see what the opportunities are, and really at the school level, at the children level, and to start to understand how Sag Harbor is a community and how they can look at opportunities here, and they could start in having a family, and they could save, and they could live here. Because clearly, from a compensation point of view, the person that's driving 2 hours to get here is paying gas and is troublesome on their life, right? So clearly, somebody's paying them a good buck to come all the way out here. Meanwhile, somebody who lives here could work here. And it's part of getting that through the education process at a young age, similar to how I recall how it was. That's just the way it was. You go up and down Main Street, and every store owner, the name of that owner was the name of the shop. That was the name of the front of the store. And today you go up and down Main Street, and it's not quite like that. And that's where we kind of lose that. And that everything being intertwined like that created the sense of community. So I think at this point we are in somewhat of a crisis in the sense of workforce issues, but I think there's no reason not to encourage the young today, because the young today will be us tomorrow.
Sure. Let's see if anybody wants to come down. Come on down. Well, okay, maybe walk all the way up there. Oh, God.
Hi, James Merrill. I have 2 offices on the Main Street that I rent. I've rented for 24 years, I think. I live outside the village on that side, And I have property in North Haven that one day I plan to build on. But so I really am involved in this village, and I think a lot of people here are involved in the village who actually don't live within the village limits. I can't be on the architectural review board in the village. I don't have any, and I know when it comes to the comprehensive planning aspect, you know, we've talked about a lot of things, but not that. If you're looking forward, and I also know from my time working as an architect in the village, that in some ways a lot of the village officials are basically volunteer. So when it comes down to the resources available to do some of the things we're talking about, I think that probably if you had a show of hands of people in this room who actually don't live within the village limits but are here because they care, you'd find out. I'm sitting next to two of them here right now, you know, and I know that I see many in the audience. So if there's a concept, I sort of wonder if the village limits as they're currently or historically described are too small to answer some of the issues that are going on here, and if there are a lot of resources outside of the village that would go to the greater metropolitan Sag Harbor concept, Noyak, North Haven, the school, fire districts, and the post office are all larger districts than this very historically tight, limited. So I don't see how we solve a lot of these problems practically without gaining their support and resources from the people who actually care but are not actually within the village limits.
Would one of our elected officials try to explain why that's possible or impossible?
Right. You know, when I first came here, I rented in Noyak, and then I rented in North Haven, and then I found enough resources I was able to save. And I actually have a question for some of the people out in the audience. And I volunteered in Sag Harbor. So I think it's the 11963 area that we're talking about. It's not just the village itself. So we need to draw, you know, from everybody, not just the village.
Yeah, and there also are grants to put villages together. So the idea to put on the table of possibly doing a 11963 merging North Haven, Sag Harbor, and that area, it would save so much money in taxes and just expand how many more resources we'd have for these problems.
So the question I have, I see my two banker friends from People's United in front of me, and my question to you is, there were programs, I don't know, we're talking about 20 years ago, I don't know what the situation is now. There were first-time homeowner programs, and Sag Harbor was actually a target area. For first-time home buyers, they were allowed to put down a low deposit to buy a house. Even though the real estate is high, I mean, at least there's an opportunity. Do those opportunities still exist?
Well, they do. What I would say, sorry. The opportunities do exist. The problem you run into there are income thresholds and there are caps as to how those programs work. Now, we come from the retail side of banking, the branch network, so I cannot pretend to be an expert on all of the affordable housing programs, but within our bank, we offer things like what they call a people's affordable mortgage. The problem is there's caps on the dollar amounts, and the real estate here is just significantly higher than those caps. So it's unfortunately, there are programs out there that really are more prevalent in low to moderate income areas, because this area is certainly does not fall under that threshold. So the short answer, Tom, is there are programs out there. Unfortunately, with the skyrocketing real estate costs out here, I'm not sure that they very much apply.
Thank you. We have a question over here. Now you're really making me work, aren't you?
I have to work to get up.
I have to say the view up here is actually very nice.
Well, thank you. I think everybody gives a little personal history. My parents finished the house here when I was 3 weeks old. Schiavone was our plumber, McCrossan was our carpenter. And so I grew up here in summertime and grew up in Harlem in the wintertime. Both of these communities are suffering from the same pressures. It's very simply gentrification.
In your side, it's commercial. From other people's side, it's residential. You are suffering from your own success. The Chamber of Commerce and the good reputation of Sag Harbor, all of those things are making it very desirable. And when it got discovered 30 years ago, things started to change. They used to have in this area, I think Yellowfin was the restaurant, and they used to have Calypso night, and the sun was setting, and one of the Schiavone guys came over to me and says, "I know you." And I said, "Who are you?" We exchanged names, and he said then the town was changing. It was 1979. So I don't know that there's any magic formula here. We are here, we are supporting you. It is the middle of winter, right? I have noticed that some restaurants at least have, some reduced cost nights, which is nice because some others just maintain the summer prices all year round. But we're here and we are supporting you. But I don't know that if you're not going to really get serious about affordable housing, giving residents preference, then you're not going to change this. This is a snowball, but it can hit the bottom of the hill. And based on what people are projecting about the economy, we're in a very tenuous time right now. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Lori Wiltshire. I've actually worked in land planning out here on the east end of Long Island for 20 years. And I've witnessed a lot of this affordable housing crises, transportation issues, and focusing on Sag Harbor itself, we have some really great assets here. One, we're a historic district, which means we can go up 3 stories. 2, we've got the only viable sewage treatment plant on the eastern end of Long Island. You take those 2 things together, and you start encouraging the 3rd story on all the buildings in the sewage treatment area, and you've got apartments upstairs. Secondly, thank you. Secondly, we have a wharf. And if we used our wharf for a passenger ferry, we could have employees coming from Riverhead, coming from Greenport, coming from Sag Harbor, coming from Peconic, but we could really go around in the morning and collect employees, and they wouldn't have a car here, and they wouldn't have to drive home at 2:30 in the morning. Mind you, those ferries are not going to run at 1:30 in the morning when the restaurant closes, but for a lot of other businesses, that might be viable.
Good idea. Thank you. Tom Gleason. Well, wait a second. Wait till I get over there. This is why you're supposed to come down to the podium.
Barbara mentioned something before, and I guess maybe this goes to Jay a little bit too. I happened to walk all over Southampton College the other day, and those dorms over there go underutilized during the summer. I never understood why Stony Brook Southampton didn't put a culinary program there that would have been able to house people during the summer. But can we get use? Can these people that need housing for the summer for employees possibly use that facility, pay Stony Brook Southampton, get some money back into the coffers for the school, and have the facilities there used?
So, I've been up to the campus too. They have a lot of abandoned dormitory facilities from the days when they had a lot more students. I want to say there's at least the potential for 750 or so beds up there. And particularly, even if they were being used for students all school year, they could be available in the summer for seasonal employees. Exactly. So there is great potential there. Mind you, though, the new hospital, Stony Brook Hospital, is going onto that campus, and they are also eyeing that site potentially for staff housing for the hospital, even doctors and interns and nurses. So I think something is going to happen connected to the development of the state-of-the-art hospital that we be moving onto the college campus. So I doubt anything will happen. I doubt anything will happen in the interim, because I think they need to figure out exactly where the hospital is going to go, where it's going to be placed, where the parking's going to be, and I think it's probably going to be used for housing related to the hospital.
Jay, is there anything new on the West Hampton Airport land? Because that's another big chunk of land relatively close that we could be thinking creatively about housing.
At Gabreski Airport, there is an industrial park under development. They have approached me at one point about doing some housing. They had under the zoning the ability to do a hotel. They don't seem to be interested in doing a hotel development there. But my last conversations with the developers is that they really, I think, are more looking for additional commercial space there. So I don't think you're going to see any housing at that property.
Emma?
I just wanted to chime in on the Stony Brook Southampton conversation because I actually teach for the creative writing MFA there and have done for the last 10 years. And I just want to say that it's a complicated situation there, made more complicated by the fact that the Southampton campus is a satellite campus to Stony Brook. And no decisions are made on the Southampton campus by anyone associated with Southampton or anything out here. All those decisions are made at Stony Brook, and many more decisions are made in Albany because it's a state university.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not an easy situation there.
We have, there's 5 business owners, I think, here today, and you have the village trustees surrounded. Is there, while you have them here, is there something that you would like to see the village provide or help you with in an effort to make your lives a little bit easier, a little bit more profitable? Nat?
So when my parents bought the building that we have on Main Street, the 2 stores below where they set up their offices was pretty vacant, and the stores heading towards what was Fleischman's Realty was pretty vacant. The whole side of that Main Street where we're on was just a very unattractive area. It took years of getting the good tenants there, encouraging those tenants, getting other tenants, and where we are on Main Street right now is an attractive side of Main Street. One of the things that concerns me, and I think it concerns everybody, is when a business doesn't succeed. And we can blame the landlord, we can blame all kinds of factors, right? But at the end of the day, when they leave, what we see is a storefront that's empty and nothing there. And it's a very unappealing and unattractive characteristic to the residents who live here. It's not an upbeat situation, and it's not attractive to tourists. It's not attractive to a landlord that has a space, and then next door to our building is another space that is empty stores. It's not good for the shopkeepers. It's just not good. So these things happen. The question is how we have regulations that dictate what kind of sign you can put on the building, what color you can paint the building, all kinds of things, what color the fire hydrant's going to be in this village. We should and could very well dictate what could be done on a storefront of an empty building. I get the fact that they want to put up a sign that says available, call this number. But its sign could be of a certain size, it could have a certain decor, there could be certain things that could be done on the window that are approved by the village. They're predetermined graphic art that covers the windows. They could be nautical in theme or thematic, and they could be provided by a supplier that the village approves and says this is what you have to put on your window. Other things, for example, when landlords sell a building and they move to another building, the whole process of disclosing, I've heard a lot of discussion that we don't even know who the landlords are. I'm a landlord, so you know who I am, but there are a lot of other landlords, you don't know who they are. And through business licenses or other mechanisms to get to who are these people. I've had conversations with Lisa in the chamber, and sometimes we don't know who owns what. And it seems odd in this age when right now Google knows exactly where I'm sitting right now. So there are some things the village can do that are small and delicate, but are very targeted and very specific to things that are a concern of us, which is the appearance of what Main Street looks like, and some disclosure of who the landlords are, so we can have conversations with them as the case may be.
The point about the windows is good. Anybody here from East Hampton Village or Southampton Village? I don't want to offend you necessarily. But we frequently use East Hampton as the poster child for bad, downtowns. And it's, if you walk downtown in East Hampton, it's, and in Southampton, it's the same thing is true. You have many, many empty storefronts, and it makes it wildly uninviting, and I believe, I know, that those villages suffer. Aidan, did you want to respond to Nat at all and his suggestions?
Yes, I would. I agree with Nat regarding the streetscape and storefronts and the idea, and I've thought about this for a long time, that the streetscape is sort of the purview of our ARB, and I'm sure if we look, there might be something in the code that would require something more attractive than brown paper. Brown paper to me is fine while there's construction going on, but it's not a medium-term solution for a store that is in between owners. I think retail, whoever owns the building at any time, has a responsibility to the street in the same way as I have a responsibility to the street of my house and what I do with it, and there's various codes and enforcement associated with that. And I do think that's something that the village could look at, that it could come under the auspices of the ARB, that you have to make a presentation of what your store is going to look like in the interim period. Regarding ownership, it's way beyond my pay grade. I have no idea what the village is legally allowed to do or not to do if someone has an LLC and they buy a property. So I just have to leave that question alone right now.
Okay. Lisa, you had a question.
Yeah, actually, it's just more of a comment. I'd actually like to see the village interfere less with businesses. And this, sorry. I mean, this is just a total personal thing, but last week I was putting up a sales sign in front of our store, as I usually do, that said fabric sale, and I had the code enforcement come down, told me I was breaking ARB rules, I needed to go get a permit, and I said, I'm putting up a banner because we're having a sale for a week, and I had to put it inside my window, because outside of the window. So I really would like to see the government not make any more rules about how we can run our business.
Do we have any other business owners out there who would like to, we have somebody waving her hand.
I just want to make a comment to...
Oh, yes.
One quick comment to Lisa. We need to distinguish between business owner and landlord. So I did a conversation about the signage, and that was landlord, and on the business side, I completely agree.
Mm-hmm. This young woman.
I just wanted to elaborate that the papered windows are a nightmare. I'm surrounded by them in my store, and it just makes me look like I'm closed. I have a store in Southampton, and we're going through a really bad time right now. It's been horrible business, and stores are closing left and right. We have 35 stores for rent in Southampton. And, it's really a bone of contention, and we really don't have this kind of community effort, going on there. Nobody is doing anything. Nobody's listening to anybody. And that's why I'm here tonight, because I'm lost. I'm trying to find my way through, this barrage of empty stores, no business, and, that's why I'm here. And I just wanted to say that I agree with the lady from the 5 and 10 that you don't want people interfering with your business. But I don't think it's right that people are papering their windows, pop-ups, they come back the next year. They need to leave a display. Otherwise, it's just completely unattractive. And to elaborate a little bit on the seasonal help, I just was thinking that, you're surrounded by water here. This might be a Ralph Cramden low-cal pizza, but, you could think about like a retired cruise ship for the seasonal help. Bringing... I'm serious.
Paging Dave Lee.
Brian. Can I just make a comment? Just while you're going up the stairs, Brian. I just wanted to say that, because I know we have a lot of local business owners here, that one of the things that I think would make a tremendous difference in terms of encouraging people to shop local, those of us who live here year-round, is to provide incentives for us to do so. We have a number of businesses, including Bay Street in Sag Harbor, that do that, and I think it would be wonderful if more businesses did. So Provisions has their fruit and nut card, which gives us a 10% discount if we live locally. Bay Street, when we started Bay Street, we created a pay what you can night which Bay Street still continues to do, as well as senior and student discounts. The bookstore, I remember we had a discount for every 10 books you bought, you were entitled to a book. Sen has their wonderful lottery program where you fill out a little form and put it in their glass jar and you can win a free dinner. And I think if more businesses had incentives for year-round residents to shop locally, it would really encourage us to get off of Amazon and come out and support local businesses even more.
Brian, can I make a quick comment? A quick comment related to Southampton. And I think the big difference between East Hampton and Southampton and Sag Harbor is, Sag Harbor does have that sewer district and has so much more vibrancy. It has that second and third story. You have a lot more foot traffic. We talked about the CPF program earlier, and that there's money available for water quality projects. And West Hampton Village actually reached out to the town for money for their sewer system because they want to put in a sewer system. If you had a sewer system in Southampton, like East Hampton, if they would do it, then you can have some of the wet uses, the restaurants, the cafes that really draw in a lot of people. And that's what, the new downtowns, because retail is tough. The new downtowns, you need that vibrancy, you need those wet uses. There's social settings. People want to interact, and food, everything seems to revolve around food. So you need those sewers. And I think that is why Southampton, East Hampton have lost so much vibrancy and why Sag Harbor has that vibrancy. Well, they have to come and ask. There's money out there. There's state money for sewers, county money, town money. But these communities have to ask. Some of them don't want growth. They're resisting growth. And one quick comment. Lori talked earlier about the water taxi. From years ago, we tried this from Sag Harbor to Greenport. I thought it was terrific. And I think we should work. You have a train station in Greenport right downtown. People could come. A lot of foot traffic in Greenport. People could come to Sag Harbor, spend money in the local stores, and not bring their cars. I think that's a great win. But the village really has to work work with the county, and I think that could happen. There could be some subsidies for a water taxi.
Okay.
I'd love to see it happen again. I really do. There were impediments last time, and the village charged a high rent to the water. They don't need to do that. They should be subsidizing it to help it happen.
Thanks, Jay. We have a question up here.
I guess my question is basically about franchising and chain stores. When do we stop, every Main Street looking the same? We have the same stores in East Hampton, the same stores in Southampton. Sag Harbor is that quaint village where we don't have that, and the bookstore is closed, and Country Lane is closed. How many more of the same stores is the village going to allow in Sag Harbor that would make us stay Sag Harbor as opposed to making us the same as East Hampton and Southampton?
So what regulation does the village have to control what businesses move in, if any? I know that the code kind of sets the size, but is there anything there that dictates what types of business?
I think within the code, when it was revised in 2009, we did change the size. I think there's a limit on the number of offices that can be they were pre-existing non-conforming offices on the ground floor. But when it comes to telling a certain business that, can we tell Starbucks that we'll allow 2 coffee shops in town but not one named Starbucks, that's illegal. We can't do that. We can just create an environment which probably makes it less attractive for a chain to come in. The thing about chains, about large national chains, is the decisions are made in such a remote location that nobody really cares. That someone will draw a line through your Main Street stores in Seattle and it's gone. There's no question about it. There's no opportunity to appeal that. So the longer we can keep national brands like that out of here, the better. Also, a lot of these stores in East Hampton, you talk about the summer stores in Southampton, they're coming out of a marketing budget. This is not about selling. This is about maintaining visibility, because your customers around Main Street in Southampton. You really don't care if you make a profit for the summer. This is all about this brand awareness. It's a sort of a higher level sell. And it's not something that will ever work for Sag Harbor. It would be the death of the village. if that starts. But having said that, we're very limited in our tools, and I got to congratulate the people who worked on the code change back in 2009. I think they did a remarkable job, considering the tools they had to work with. I think our Main Street is in pretty good stead compared to most communities.
Mhm.
And we just, they deserve our recognition.
Hang on, we have a question over here. I see this gentleman. Yes, if you could pass that.
Hi, my name's Adam Miller. I'm a sponsor of this session. I'm also a local business owner and a lawyer. I live in East Hampton. I enjoy Sag Harbor, and my business is in Bridgehampton. So I think this is not localized to Sag Harbor, but the one thing I can say, being a real estate attorney, and Jay can probably appreciate this, from 1998 there was a law passed here that everyone who buys here, even if you don't live here, is taxed at 2%. And that has worked, I think, tremendously to stabilize or to increase a lot of the prices that we all enjoy with our homes. However, I think that a partnership or an expansion of the use of those funds can deliver a lot of what we're talking about tonight. And I'd like to hear the government's view on that.
Well, Assemblyman Thiel, who was the original sponsor of that CPF legislation, and it's been a tremendous success, has a bill up in Albany not to take some of those funds away, but to add another 0.5% to the transfer tax to be used for affordable housing, to create a fund. And that could be for low interest loans. It could be to help bridge the divide between, that affordability gap. It could go to help subsidize some of these apartment complexes and things like that. So it could go a long way. I think it faces a difficult battle up in Albany, but it would generate millions and millions of dollars, and I'm sure we could put it to good use and create some housing opportunities for our workforce.
My closing, for instance, I see hundreds of thousands of dollars a week going into their fund. And my point is, the question, we need people in these towns to make your businesses vibrant, right? So if we don't have those people, which we know, I would say 80% of my clients are live in the city or elsewhere, London, wherever. So if they're not here, how do we create incentives locally? With these funds that other people are mandated to contribute at their closing, besides just sterilizing land. And what that's done is it's risen property value, but it's also, I guess, people are priced out of the community, I should say. So there has to be, I guess in 2020, is that something that's on the ballot again, or?
If it gets through Albany, there would be a mandatory referendum, so it would end up on the ballot. I can't tell you what year it would end up on the ballot, and I certainly hope people would support it. And I don't think adding an extra 0.5% is going to really affect the real estate market out here, but it could really make a big difference for those people who are trying to live in the community who are priced out. Absolutely.
There's a tremendous amount of money that I see on a monthly basis, and I know it gets used to buy land, but I've been out here since 2003, and I've seen property values increase to benefit us all.
And we've had great success on the preservation side.
I think it's time now, we're at a critical point where we need to, as a community, revisit how those funds are used. Because this is all about money.
Well, again, I mentioned this earlier, but we can use 20% of them for water quality projects. So to change somebody's sanitary system so it removes nitrogen to protect the harbor.
Maybe we can increase it to help 8th Street.
Well, we are using it. We're spending $10 million here in Sag Harbor on Steinbeck Park, so that can happen. And we've got the cinema, $4 million for the cinema. So a lot of the money is coming back for community-based uses.
Well, I appreciate the work you've done in that regard. I just think that these out-of-towners who don't live here, I'd love to see the commercial keep up with the residential. It's sort of, we're at this point where, yes, property values have increased so much, but that's going to go away if the commercial downtown districts, like this lady talked about, Southampton, can't support the people who want to come here in the summer. So if there's nothing fun to do downtown, then why are they coming here, right? And so, I live in East Hampton, so I'm I won't get into that. We need another forum for that.
So we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Under downtown. I find if I have guests coming in the summer, I drive to Sag Harbor to walk around.
All right. Nat, one observation, then I want to let.
I'll defer.
Do you want to speak first? I
I
want to talk about a couple of positive things that are going on here
That's
and make a
exactly what I was gonna do.
differentiation. Because I've actually sat on Save Sag Harbor Board, Bay Street Board, Village Board, I'm on zoning code, and the Park Board. So I've kind of seen a lot of different iterations, and I was part of that 2009 code. The code is always being upgraded. I'm also a business owner, except I'm my own business, and then I'm a psychoanalyst. Second floor offices were too big. Small practitioners couldn't work here. 2 months ago, that's changed. They're 400 square foot offices. I've also introduced into the village board the idea that now can mirror small apartments. So second floor offices can go from 850 to 400 because that's what many young couples can live in. So those are small, immediate things. I've also suggested we revisit, as someone who lives here, not on board, because I can't do it on the zoning board, and I really encourage people to come to the boards, run for offices, be on boards, because this is a responsive village. We don't have people who are sitting on these boards. I had to go on the zoning board because Tim needed to take a break. Hopefully, we'll be coming back. It's my wish. But we still are not a full board. If you want to change and get involved with what's going on here, you have to do that. What happens in the village boards, we only hear what's kind of being introduced and not working often. Going back to the water taxi. When we did the Long Wharf project, we specifically made it possible for the potential of the water taxi to come in if it's reintroduced. We could have just built it without that foresight, but that's not part of what we understand. So what village government can do is, I think as Lisa's saying, do less things arbitrarily. Sometimes we don't know. The other thing that I think we can do is continue to upgrade the sewage system like we're doing. The part about living on the water, there's a rise in water here. The Peconic is becoming dead. We are the body that protects that. We have to make sure what goes into it isn't poisoned. Main Street would be dead if what happened in Riverhead happened here. And the exact same configuration that goes into Ligony Brook is what happened in Riverhead. There can be an inversion, and then we'll have a nice unremovable smell for years, and we could watch what happens. That's the negative part. The difference is, as a village, we are trying to change what goes into that area and control it. So I think that what you need to see, it's like the Monty Python, and what did Sag Harbor village government ever do for us? It's like it takes care of the garbage on the streets, it takes care of the sewer systems, takes care of making sure the fire department happens, the ambulance happens, and, highway departments happen, and that's what you need to make sure can happen. The only thing I would have a question for Jay would know better, and I know it's the town, not the village. Our budget, even with our 3.1 billion value, is probably less than the boats values here in the summer, by the way. And that's, I think, a fact, is that I believe the towns of both, the villages of both East Hampton and Southampton have budgets that are above 30 million, correct? They're very large budgets.
I'm not sure the budget.
Ours is, I think, going to be 13 million. So going back to Jim's point, we don't have the money. So last thing, and shut up, is Barbara sort of put her finger on the pulse. It's private, public partnerships that have to develop that are going to be able to give us what we need. We as a government can help in zoning to make things a little bit better, but it's going to be the partnerships between public and private that are going to change it, in my opinion. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Would any of you folks like to respond to that? Nat?
Yeah. I'd like to get back to the, let's call it the Main Street business discussion for a minute, but tie right back into Robbie's comment. So when we look at the situation today, and we see some buildings that got sold for some big numbers and some empty storefronts, and people imagine the worst of what that is, if you change your lens a little bit and open it up and go back a little bit of time, you know, the post office used to be on Main Street, right? And the police department used to be on Main Street, and the fire department main headquarters station was on Main Street. And that's not the case today, but what filled those voids? So we've seen Sag Harbor Main Street change quite a bit over not that long ago, and certainly in my lifetime I've seen Main Street change in that way. The post office is not there, and there's some shops there now, right? And if we look on Division Street, where Lester Motors used to be, and now it's a hardware store, and then where Dutcher had this place there, and now that's a bunch of little shops. And if we look at where the gas ball is, you know, that's gone. And if you go down Bay Street, they tore down all those tanks and all that stuff there, and Geek Hampton and all. So there's a lot of things that have happened in Sag Harbor because the market drove it, right? So does government driving that? No. That's the market that's driving that. And those businesses came here, a lot of them came under the older regulations, the older zoning, and they're all fine. And one of the things that's unique about all those is they're not big box and they're smaller shops. So where we are today, in terms of things that could be done, is Sag Harbor has certain needs. We have a lot of shops, we have a lot of stores, and we have some right now that are empty. But real estate brokers are trying to fill those spots for landlords, and the question is, who's gonna fill them? And what do we need? What kind of shops do we need? Do we need a shoemaker? Do we need a dry cleaner? What do we need? And there's people up island and all around the country are trying to figure out where they can land in a village and maybe have a family and maybe start a business and do something. Well, we need to connect to them. So many communities have like a business development group or an IDA, industrial development agency or authority or something like that that sort of promotes or encourages not the concept of tourism, which is more along the lines of the Chamber of Business, it's promoting business, but one that encourages development of certain target businesses that are strategic for the village that we want, that are not big box stores, but are smaller shops, and provide the kind of services that we are looking for year-round, community-wise. We just need to find them, and they need to find us. And a landlord would be happy to have a tenant that's going to be here a long time. I know how I feel on my end. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you. Jesse?
I'd also just highlight that I would also recommend Oyster Bay has a Main Street association, and again, that's a demographic similar to us. But these have hired people, so one of the other things that we believe at Save Sag Harbor is if we had a paid village manager, this is the kind of thing that they might get involved in, or perhaps helping the chamber get a paid person that doing this kind of research and really working with the real estate people to bring in the right kind of businesses might be something to put on the table.
Jesse, I'll give you last word.
All right. So one of the things that I think is really important, especially ending this talk tonight, is understanding how everyone can help out and what's the next move. As a part of the Chamber of Commerce, Lisa and I are always talking about, well, there's a lot to do, and as a volunteer organization, we have a hard time balancing work and building a community, and we need more help. And that's what it really comes down to, is that there's lots of things that we can do, and we need more volunteers within the chamber to come together, put our minds, our resources together to be able to come up with a great strategy. I know that I'll be speaking with Barbara in the future about understanding how other communities and other villages have done so well with their planning, and hopefully, you know, we have more voices that can come together and bring us all together and make Sag Harbor even better. I mean, it's truly an amazing village. You know, there's nothing wrong here. It's just we can always make it better.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you all. I'm going to turn this back over to Gavin. Thank you all for coming tonight.
Thank you, everyone, again. You know, as we feared with this event, we really just scratched the surface. But join the Chamber of Commerce, do a study, Save Sag Harbor, help the village board accomplish things, and we can all come together and get some things done. Thank you very much.